According to the DSM-5, ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder affecting both children and adults. It is described as a persistent or ongoing pattern of inattention and/or hyperactivity impulsivity that gets in the way of daily life or typical development. In 2011, 11% of children aged between 4 and 17 were diagnosed with ADHD in the United States. 6.1% of these children received medication for it. Adderall is a class of drug called psychostimulant that is commonly prescribed for the treatment of ADHD. Psychostimulants have been found to be the most effective drug in reducing symptoms of inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. The nervous system is divided into the central nervous system that is composed of the brain and the spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system. A neuron has dendrites which receive information, a soma or cell body, an axon which carries the message, the myelin sheath, and terminal button. When a neuron reaches a charge of -60 millivolts, it activates. We call this a presynaptic neuron, and sends an electrical charge called an action potential traveling down the axon to the terminal buttons, where neurotransmitters are released, and to the synaptic cleft, which is a small space between the terminal buttons of the presynaptic neuron and the dendrites of the postsynaptic neuron. After their release, these neurotransmitters bind to the receptor of the receiving neuron. Finally, the neurotransmitters must be cleared from the synaptic cleft in preparation for the next message. For this, they either go through the process of enzymatic degradation, which is the destruction of neurotransmitters, or reuptake. That is, when neurotransmitters are taken back to the presynaptic neuron and reused for the next action potential.
Oh no, here we go. Party in a pill. We gon' eat until shadows look real.
The biggest player in improving symptoms of ADHD is a neurotransmitter called dopamine. Some studies suggest that a person with ADHD has a dopamine dysfunction and lacks the normal levels of the neurotransmitter. Dextroamphetamine affects the central nervous system by increasing dopamine levels, while levoamphetamine affects the peripheral nervous system by increasing norepinephrine. Adderall blocks reuptake of dopamine and norepinephrine and increases the release of these neurotransmitters into the synaptic cleft. This mixture of amphetamines is able to enhance the activity of dopamine by binding to dopamine receptors and prolonging the availability of neurotransmitters in the synaptic cleft by inhibiting the process of enzymatic degradation. Adderall has many side effects, which are loss of appetite, insomnia, weight loss, nervousness and anxiety, and addiction. Amphetamines have a dependence, tolerance, and withdrawal characteristics, and it is possible to build up tolerance where the person using the drug will need to take larger doses to achieve the same effect. Over time, the body may become dependent on the drug to function normally. The withdrawal symptoms that could arise include tiredness, panic attacks, crankiness, extreme hunger, depression, and nightmares. That is why Adderall is classified as a Schedule II drug by the FDA due to its high abuse potential. Also, Adderall has a reputation of being used for recreational purposes. That is why it is important to understand the consequences of using this drug.